by the draft board. The draft board in Yellowstone County required the registration of anyone over the age of 18. My birthday was in February, so I was registered in February. I was drafted in late June. And in the process, this was the paper that originally sent me for drafting, and this was some of the orders that I had when I was being sent along the way. Again, these are the fellows that I went from Laurel with to the Army. These pictures here were taken after I had a furlough from my first experiences in the service. I went from Laurel to Billings to Butte to Fort Douglas, Utah, and from there I went to Fort Knox for my basic training. Fort Knox is probably more known for the gold storage than anything else, but at that time it was the place where all the armored units were trained for tanks. This tank picture here sits out in front of the main entrance to Fort Knox and was the primary tank that was used during World War II. On the back side is, after I finished my basic training, which was 9 weeks long, I was put into what was called a special tank company. It was an experimental tank that they were trying to determine whether it was worth manufacturing or not. 70 tons, which was not quite twice as large and heavy as the main tank that was already being produced at that time for the Army. These are some pictures of that tank. It had some very unique features. It could turn around in its own length. You just reverse the tracks and it would do a complete spin. So I spent a period of time after my basic 9-week training working in this company. I was doing 2 or 3 different kinds of jobs. I had been one of the drivers. I had been a gunner. They had a machine gun on it also, so you had a separate unit for that. So again, here's some pictures of the tank and some of the fellows that were also in that same company. After a while, they just, all of a sudden, I guess it was unexpected, they decided that the tank was not feasible to manufacture. And so they shut down the whole operation. This is a manual about that particular tank and all of the different versions that they were considering at that particular time. So when they shut down the production, that dismantled our company. At that point, which was about in, I would guess it probably was late March, early April, they scheduled all the fellows that were in that company to do other things. At that point, I was scheduled to go to ASTP program in Madison, Wisconsin, which was a training program for officers. Within about 2 weeks before I was ready to go to Madison, my orders were changed again, and it was just, I was then assigned to go overseas. So I went from Fort Knox to Camp Shanks in New York, and there at Camp Shanks, that's was the debarkation point for the ships going overseas. I traveled overseas on what was amounted to a luxury liner, cruise ship type boat. It probably was about 2,000 men on this, very crowded conditions, but the name of the ship is Aquitania. And we traveled from New York to Glasgow, Scotland. In Glasgow, we got on the train and went by train to southern England. We ended up in a little town named Tidworth, and Tidworth was really just right around the corner from the Stonehenge, which probably most of you know a little bit about. So it happened with some degree of speed getting there. So I was in England in mid-May of 1944. Now, D-Day took place on June the 7th in 1944. I was in England for the most part. Just we were sitting doing nothing except KP and guard duty. So it really didn't amount to anything happening in England. We were away from London quite a ways, so we didn't really have experience of the bombing that was going on in London and some of the other areas of England where there were armed services. Our particular area didn't happen to get hit with anything. After D-Day, it was primarily a waiting thing for me. I was considered in as a replacement. I knew that when I left England and went to the continent after the invasion took place, that I would go in to replace somebody else in was killed or wounded or whatever in one of the armored units somewhere in France. When I landed, it was about 3 weeks after D-Day before I got to France. The area in which I went into was just about in this vicinity here. This area here was highly contested. That was the area of the hedgerows. And again, you may not know hedgerows, but what they basically were is that about 1 to 2 acres of land would be surrounded by a very dense hedge with sometimes frequently berms of earth in that hedge. And there would usually be in those plots maybe 2 entrances, one on one side and one on the other side. So this was a very difficult area to go through combat-wise. And there was the tanks couldn't knock the berms down, and so they had to always take a look at going in one of those entrances. And if there happened to be a German tank sitting on the other end, you had problems. By the way, the German tanks were probably much better equipped with their artillery than we were. Our tanks had a 76 millimeter cannon on it. The Germans had an 88. And this is an illustration of a section of that barrel. And the 88s would penetrate the armor on the tanks that the U.S. Army had. So there was a very difficult fight during that time that they were in the hedgerows. I don't know if you want to pass this around and look later maybe. But the hedgerow area extended up to about in here. I just got in on the very end of the time going through those hedgerows. When we broke out of that area, this travel through here went at a much higher rate of speed. The Germans had decided that they were going to retreat back through this area. They were fighting and retreating, but they were not very intense about their fighting. All of that area through here, many prisoners were taken and traveled very quickly.
When you say many prisoners were taken, the Germans were taking prisoners, or?
We were taking German prisoners. Yeah. Somewhere there was a statistic about that I can't. It was in the 100,000s that were taken in this period of time through here. Now, it wasn't just the unit that I was with, which is the 2nd Armored, but there were other units here, infantry units, all kinds of engineers, that kind of thing.
What time of the year was it?
Well, I went in there in, this would have been about July, getting in there. So in from July through here was all basically summertime weather. So as we move through here, get up to the border with Belgium, and our unit, the 82nd Armored Reconnaissance, was the first one to enter Belgium, and then pushed through Belgium into Holland, and we were the first ones into Holland as well. So that area, again, through here was not highly contested. However, there were some times when we would get into a forested area or something like that, stop. We would receive artillery shells hitting the tops of trees. So the shrapnel focused down from the trees. By the way, our kind of war was sure a lot different than what's going on now with Afghanistan and those places. We at least knew who our enemies were and where they were. Although that was the name of our unit, was the 82nd Reconnaissance Battalion. Our idea was to go out there and find where the Germans were. We pushed through this whole area until we got up just outside of the border of Germany and ended up in a kind of a holding pattern, because by that time it was late September. We're getting into colder weather, and the Germans were going to be much more difficult because they were defending their homeland. It was on their border. They were going to be much more intense about their fighting. Essentially, the units were running out of supplies. All of the supplies were coming here and then following where we were going this way. Well, it was not very efficient. It's oftentimes, even up in here, when we first hit into Belgium and Holland, we had to stop and wait for a day just so we could get enough gasoline to go the next day. And so we ended up with supply in this area slowing us down, not being able to go any further up here. So trying to establish the supply lines was quite important at that point. And so one of the things that happened is they wanted to make sure that they got to Antwerp, which was a main port, and supplies could be then shipped in there much easier, and transportation to where we were was much easier as well. So that kind of thing limited the advance into Germany. And the weather got worse and worse. We got into October, into November, and sat essentially along what was known as the Maginot Line, or Ziegfeld Line, I guess sometimes. So that fortification was a World War I thing, but it also kind of told you that that was an area that the Germans were really going to defend definitely. So that's kind of where we spent a couple of months. And at that point, it was kind of varying back and forth. The Germans would check us out, we would send patrols in, they would send patrols back. And it was back and forth with the patrol thing. One of the times that when I was on an outpost in a foxhole in a nighttime affair, we had a challenge of a German coming at us. He could not answer the password, and so we ended up with that German challenging and coming after us in the foxhole. And when he came at the foxhole, he was shooting his pistol, and when he came over the edge, he got shot, but as he did, he threw his pistol into the foxhole, and I picked up that pistol. So this is one of the souvenirs that I brought home from the war.
You couldn't bring the pistol in, you might understand why.
It's a P-38. It's not, oftentimes the pistols that were used by the Germans were Lugers, which are a little bit different shape than that. The towns that we were in this area were called Linnich and Jülich. And we were there, and there was much destruction because there was a lot of artillery fire. We were on that borderline. Action was going back and forth. Nobody was really making any great advances, but you saw some of the damages. I happen to have a camera along, and so here are some of the pictures of some of the damage in that area. On the back side is a picture up here of the vehicle that we had, that I was a part of, and another one down here. Interesting thing about this, a day or two after this picture was taken, the driver of that vehicle ran over a mine, and it blew up the vehicle and killed him. Take a drink of water.
While he's watering down, I'll tell you that there were 3 war bond drives that brought famous people to Montana. They had parades, football games, parties, and armed forces shows. The per capita of Montanans bought more bonds in those 3 drives than any other state. There was 15,000 Americans killed in action by June 43. 92% of the U.S. budget was spent on military. Everybody listened to war reports on the radio and watched the casualty list in the paper, because everybody knew somebody in the armed forces and somebody that had been killed. In 1943, rationing was in full blast, and I think I told you something. I made a mistake. I said 1 month's ration would buy 1 can of pineapple. It must have been a gallon can, because it was supposed to be 2 cans. veggies. That's why everybody had gardens. And the women's lives changed because they went from housewife to filling empty jobs. And I think I told you about this last time. Rosie the Riveter was one of the examples. If you get one of those posters, save it. They're valuable. How many of you know Jeanette Rankin? You better all put up your hands. Yeah, Jeanette Rankin. What did she do? Somebody said it.
She's the first woman in Congress or the House of Representatives?
Yeah, she was in Congress. What did she do in Congress?
She opposed both World Wars.
She was the only one that voted against something. Yeah, and there were comments about her, but the Billings Gazette said she was a brave woman, and I think she was. And they said, someday they'll have a plaque for her in bronze. You know where the plaque is?
There's a statue of her in the Capitol.
Yeah. Some under her statue at the Capitol. Okay, I better let him continue.
I managed to skip too fast when I was talking about this area down in here. This is an operational map. Since we didn't have Google to help us, this is the kind of map that each car had to know where the roads were in that particular area and the kinds of villages that there were along the way. So this operational map was actually used by one of our car commanders. So. Okay, after the stalemate that we had up along the German border is when the Battle of the Bulge started. The German offensive that broke through our lines in the area of Sels and that general area, Ardennes Forest. The breakthrough, primarily led by the Germans that had their 88 tanks, and they were attempting to break through to get to that Antwerp seaport and cut off our supplies, and that was their intent, is that they were going to divide our forces and cut off our supplies. Well, they had made a considerable advance into the Ardennes before they got stopped by relatively few troops. Our particular division was in the upper area of Linnich and next to the German border up here. In 24 hours, we traveled from there down to the head of the penetration of the 2nd Panzer and the 5th Panzer divisions. Now, when we were traveling in our vehicles, and let's see if I can find it. Well, oh, here. This is the kind of vehicle we were in when we went down that 100 miles to the head of where the bulge came through. Now, when we came down to that point, our division was transferred or changed from being an motorized outfit to one in which we were on foot. So we had to completely change the kinds of things we had been doing. We didn't have our vehicles anymore, and we were on foot like any of the rest of the infantry. Here are a number of the pictures of the times that we were in that first meeting of the Germans. And when you get a chance to look at it closer, we were in a lot of snow, 1 to 2 feet of snow most of the time. We were not equipped very well with in terms of tents or places to sleep, and we were on the move all of the time trying to find where the Germans were and to take them out. This is one of the times when you hear the stories in which some of the Germans spoke enough good English that they would impersonate and deal with the with our units as if they were a part of it. When the breakthrough occurred, it was in December. We were there until things pretty much cleared out by mid-January. We still were taking care of cutting off small units, taking prisoners, and reestablishing our line in that particular area. So after we finished, and we moved back to our position up in the Linnich area, it was into the end of January. And again, we sat for a period of about a month until the General Command said it's time to begin going into Germany. So by the 1st of March, the push began to move into Germany. On March the 3rd, in a little town named Krefeld, I was wounded. I was hit by a mortar shell. It landed in front of me, and part of the fragment went through my leg. One hit me in the chest, and another one hit me on the pinky finger. So that time, we were again doing the reconnaissance things in our vehicle, and we would push into the area and wait and see if we could find Germans, and then call for our tanks to move in, or artillery, or whatever the case might be. So that was kind of the first part of the offensive of bringing the war to an end. The way in which I earned the Bronze Star is that at one of the points we were in a situation where we were in a secluded area but able to observe an open spot area, and a U.S. Army motorcyclist came across that open area. The Germans dropped a mortar in front of him and blew him off his motorcycle. And the reason he was on the motorcycle is they used those kinds of things to carry messages from one unit to another. Again, radios were not the most reliable thing in the world, so they used written messages carried by carriers. My platoon leader said, "Come on, let's go." We grabbed a stretcher and went out into the area where this fellow was knocked off his cycle, picked him up and started carrying him off, and that's when the mortar shell landed in front of me. We continued to carry him off of got up and carried him off of the rest of the field, and took him to the hospital along with me and the platoon sergeant. So that's kind of where these two medals came from. After that time frame, I went back to Paris and was in a general hospital, which was operated by the U.S. Army, and spent the next 6 weeks in the hospital. After that, our unit kept going through and into Germany, taking many prisoners. They found that they had ran into several of the
Senior moment.
well, they ran into the camps where the prisoners were held, and they found some of the stalags where the German Jews had been kept as prisoners, and many of them killed, Holocaust type thing. So they pursued and continued on that way, and just about the week before the end of the war, I rejoined my unit. And one of the things we were doing at that point is we were pushing on from the middle of Germany over in the vicinity of Hanover, and from Hanover our unit was headed for Magdeburg, which was on the Elbe River. And in that 1 week interval, the treaty was signed and the war came to an end. Part of why we were not allowed to go any further than the river was the Russians said, no, we will take care of that side of Germany. So our unit stopped and ended in one location at the riverside. Then after the war was over with, we ended up, our unit was moved into Berlin. We were one of the occupying forces that went in there, and the primary purpose of our being in there was to provide some degree of authority for our part of occupying Germany. And it was then set up that that's where the Potsdam Conference would be. And so we served as the, what would be called the Honor Division for that Potsdam Conference. Some interesting things about the Potsdam Conference, and there are two pictures on here that are quite interesting. One of them was taken, and this is on a billboard now, almost immediately put up in the middle of Berlin, of what the picture was of the Yalta Conference, which was prior to the end of the war. And the other one was a set of pictures that were put up at the Potsdam Conference. Now, in that interval of time between, Roosevelt died. So his picture shows up in the Yalta picture, but Truman's picture is in the Potsdam Conference. I thought that was interesting that both of them were recognized, but in relationship to different conferences. As part of the honored group, it shows a couple of formations here, and also a few more pictures of some of the things that we did during that time we were located in Berlin. Again, here's the pictures of the snow and the bulge. On the back side are pictures of the Potsdam Conference time in Berlin.
How many men were in your unit?
Pardon me?
How many people were in your unit?
Our company had about 300. The platoon was 4 cars. Each car had 4 people in it, so roughly 16.
Did you meet any Russians
Pardon me?
at the conference? Were there have any contact with the Russian soldiers?
Oh, yes. One of the pictures in there, I think, shows one of my friends sitting together with a Russian on a statue, beside a statue. So we did have some contact. Did not understand the language, of course. And amazing what you can do with sign language and get along just fine. The Russians, rather interestingly, while they were there, immediately started building a big memorial with one of their tanks sitting on top of it. Again, the Russians were very insistent on the division of Germany so that they ended up with a substantial part. And Berlin ended up being divided into 4 parts. So the Potsdam Conference really was a case of divvying up Germany and setting the tone for how they were supposed to operate. So it was, I think, interesting that the United States did not take quite as much of a lead in pursuing how Germany would survive as they should have. Stalin had a tremendous impact on the way that Germany was subdivided. Of course, you always pick up a few souvenirs wherever you go. And on this one, there's a couple of postcards. One of them shows Hitler at the 1936 Olympics, and another one shows him on parade. On the back side is another postcard of Cologne and the cathedral there, which is probably one of the most famous cathedrals in the world. And another is of the Reichstag, which is the basic government building of Germany at that time. When Germany was in full operation, this was the kind of money which they had. When occupation took place, the part of Germany that we had any influence on, we set up our own monetary system, and these were the little bills that were used at that time. Another sidelight is that communicating back home was always a problem. You ended up writing letters. You never knew for sure how long it was going to take for that letter to get home. You never knew how long it was going to take to get to you. I saved a couple of these letters. My parents saved them. And this is one in which I wrote the letter in September. I think in terms of where I was in September. And apparently, in part of it, the censor, who happened to be the lieutenant in charge of that company, who read all these letters, didn't like what I had to say, so he cut a part of it out. The other way in which it communicated was called the V-mail, and it was a little fold-out type of card that gave you at least a little space to write a letter. And all mail was free at that time as far as the servicemen were considered. One of the things I did, and I think I maybe mentioned it earlier, is that I was an unruly child, so I was very demanding. And one of the things that I kept writing home about was, send me some pineapple, send me pineapple. Well, I was not a very thinking person, because by that time the South Pacific was pretty much closed off. Hawaii wasn't sending too much pineapple to the U.S. So I'm sure my dad did everything he could, stand on his head, to get me some pineapple. And I did get it occasionally. So. One of another email here. This one is the inside of one is microfilm. But one of the things along the way is that this letter was sent by Burton K. Wheeler to my mother shortly after I was wounded and sent to the hospital. And then a telegram, the same thing. A little bit about, this is called an Eisenhower jacket, short-waisted. On the front of it, insignia that's U.S. Army, but over here it shows a cavalry unit. Originally, armored units were formed up from cavalry units. The 2nd Armored Division started out in Fort Hood, Texas, and back in World War I they were riding horses. And then it became a tank unit along the way. And then on this part of the uniform here, this cord is called a Belgian Four Rougère. It was given by the Belgian government to our company for first entrance into the country. It originally was used to tie feed bags onto horses as we went along.
Speed it up the road.
Yeah, I know. And these are the couple of medals that I have on here, and also the units that battled that fought along the way.
Well, great, yeah. Good job, Noah. Do you want to have a quick question before you go, or do you have to... What exactly did you do on the armored car?
I was the driver part of the time and gunner part of the time. So those are the kinds of things we did. I really never knew how to drive until I got in the Army.
Then you had no choice.
Yeah.
Why did they get you out of the armored car? I bet you're upset about that. To leave the nice warm car for the
No,
snow.
they were interested in getting more
I didn't run very often, did it?
Those are the ones that were 6 months old.
Yeah.
I couldn't take them out now. Yeah. But these two, yeah. And at that time, there were lots of bigots, prejudiced people. My father.
Yeah.
Archie Bunker. You know Archie Bunker? He was on TV.
All in the family.
All in the family.
Yeah.
I couldn't didn't think of that.
I
Yeah.
couldn't talk any faster.
You did
I
great.
know,
Yeah.
you
There's
were
so
having
much to talk about. You
a
did.
little bit of,
That is such a good picture.
Isn't that dandy?
yeah,
And who was Wheeler again? Who sent here along the telegram?
he was a
Kurt K.
congressman.
Wheeler, senator.
We talked about him in class, haven't we?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got some good.
Oh, that's amazing.
Didn't even get to pass around the newsletter.
Oh, yeah.
He's got a bundle of those.
Yeah, that,
Oh, you
that
saved
one,
it.
that one has the explanation of, about this cord.
Oh, cool.
Okay, that was a Belgian,
For sure.
yeah. Where'd you get it from?
Yeah.
First one into Belgium.
Oh, okay.
Freeing the Belgian people.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the, if you wanna read the citation, it's.
Have you gone back?
I went through the area but didn't know it. We went to Germany and visited a friend, and he took us around, and we drove right through the area. At that time, I didn't put my trip together with the
Yeah, you're
past.
just riding along and.
Well, and we were there when they were celebrating the landing on the beaches, and we were so busy we didn't go there.
It's easy to do.
You know, that I had that story about going, and when we were in Japan, going to the bamboo.
Bamboo shop.
Oh.
Yeah.
But that needed.
Our after things that we've done has been interesting too, because we went back to Germany, we've been back there 4 times. And one of the times, the first time we went back, we stayed with a fellow who was also a high school principal. So we had much in common that one.
Mhm.
Turns out we were both in the Army at the same time.
Oh, really?
Both wounded at the same time.
So it was, you know, we were able to talk about it a little bit, but it was not adversarial or anything like that.
That's, well, you know, a lot of time, but still. You
Yeah.
were both
And
drafted, you know.
we stayed with-
Yeah.
Both ordered in. It's not like.
The man was younger, and he said this war was not our making. But then he took us to visit his dad. His dad was an old Nazi. His dad sat here, and the ladies sat back there. And his wife did not like him.
Not like her husband?
No, her father.
Oh, okay.
And that was an interesting little afternoon.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. But these people have maintained friendships with us.
That's really neat.
Over the years. Yeah.
I've seen that monument.
Have you?
Yeah, it's a huge monument right in front of the Reichstag.
Yeah.
It's good. I've seen that tank. That's amazing. They were building it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the first thing they did is the city's in ruin, but we're going to build a monument.
The Russians wanted to make
Well-
sure they had command of the Berlin.
Well, the funny thing is that's in the British occupation zone. So they built it and then pulled out.
Yeah.
So the British had it.
Well, it was a good thing that we had the airlift, because we wouldn't even have maintained a foothold in Berlin. if
Oh,
we
yeah.
hadn't. Yeah. Yeah, and actually, the US came out on the swim end of that Potsdam
Well,
meeting.
yeah. They let Stalin get too much.
Well, I think that Roosevelt was sick at the time of the Yalta.
Well, it was a tough one because he
Yeah.
also had an army of about 12 million men. There wasn't a lot we could do. Hey, cut it out. Well, now what about the Spanish?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't bother.
I know what's everybody going, yeah, with the knife. You thought that was pretty good.
I didn't bring this out. I almost didn't bring it at all because, you know,
Oh, yeah.
security officer here might not be too happy about it.
Yeah,
Down the window.
you're probably not going to be profiled as a threat. So.
But anyway, you know, let's put on the end of one of their rifles. The Mauser rifle had a place that this would fit onto.
Where did you get that?
Well, pretty much after the end of the war, I picked this up, and I don't know really why I did, except that
Why not?
it indicated that at one point they were considering hand-to-hand type battle. Well, it
Well,
passed
that
way
came from
beyond
World
that.
War I, didn't it?
Oh, I don't know if it was World War I or not,
With the idea.
but the idea was because they were doing hand-to-hand stuff there. But by the time you got into World War II, much more sophisticated with the machine guns and the rapid fire stuff, you know.
Yeah, so that wouldn't be happening today. Yeah.
The cutout areas.
We were talking in class one day how the war today is just such a different thing. On the home front, you're hardly affected. You don't even know you're at war.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And how that must affect the effort.
A altogether different attitude now.
Well,
People now are we hurting any? We don't hardly notice any difference. I'm sure there is, but basically,
well, if you have somebody in the
if you're in the
armed
service,
forces-
that's about the only connection where you begin to feel like there's a war.
Mhm. Yeah. We have good friends here from Nigeria. No,
Liberia.
Liberia.
Liberia, okay.
Native Africans, and they live here. Wonderful people. I think that a good lesson would be how our tolerance has improved. Because at this time, we didn't really associate with those two boys.
Oh my God, you know, it just wasn't done.
And if we would have had Native American in that really looked Native American, we would have probably been told not to play with them. In fact, my mother had a hissy fit when I go see Mamie, but I told Mom her teepee was cleaner than most of the American houses. She had skins on the floor.
Oh, really? Oh, God.
And she didn't let everybody in. I got to go in.
So you were special.
Well, yeah,
A good friend.
Mamie and I were friends. That was the first time that child had ever eaten an orange. Part of the reason they were picking the bitterroots was that the woman dried the bitterroots and they maintained their vitamin C content. And that's what she was feeding Mamie, because that little girl was skinny. She had
They
no.
didn't tell them when this was taken.
Okay, when was that?
We went back to the dedication of World War II memorial.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a
That she
parade.
survived
I
was
thought,
totally
that's the best
amazing.
picture I have of one of those vehicles. It doesn't show up in any of the rest of my pictures.
Pretty good shot of the front of your old one, but of your
Yeah.
old, but.
Yeah, this is great.
So how did your parents find out you were wounded? Was it through the War Department that they found out, or did you?
Yeah,
contact them?
Yeah, it was-
Telegram.
It was that
It was a
telegram that
telegram
said it?
on one of
really?
these.
Mhm.
Where is it?
Oh, you're just the worst paper
Well,
flipper.
this came back.
Yeah, it kinda got to me in a weird order, so I just figured I'd.
Oh, well.
Well,
But
Yeah,
that was,
it was the.
that was the original one, yeah.
Yeah, some of those officers had bad duty,
Yeah.
and some of the people at home had bad duty too.
oh, here it is. This is the letter that was sent to Bert.
So
And then on the
that's-
back side is a telegram that was also sent.
So that's the original way that she found out, was just,
Yeah.
didn't know anything.
Yeah. You know, it would be periods of time when I would not write a letter, so they kind of understood that if they didn't hear from me every week, why it was for whatever reason. But, you know,
Yeah. Okay.
How long were you in Berlin after the war, or?
well, we went there, probably it was, let's see, war ended in May. We were probably there the 1st of June. We were there from the 1st of June until, let's see, Potsdam conference is in July. We were, about the end of July, we were sent back to Frankfurt, Germany. And in Frankfurt, that's when we mothballed all of our vehicles.
Is that when you were dismissed from the
Well,
army?
No, not quite.
Get ready for storage.
Okay.
But the interesting part about that was we were supposed to take our vehicles to a big parking lot, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And our company was located about, maybe 12 miles or thereabouts away from there. And the vehicle they assigned me to take had rather shoddy brakes. And about halfway through that trip, I had no brakes. So, I had great fun shifting, I'll tell you. Fortunately, those things geared down pretty good.
Yeah, you go down to, good thing you learn how to finally drive and then.
So,
So it's just the Purple Heart, or?
yeah,
And that was for the stage.
the mortar shell hit me.
They didn't move fast enough.
Oh, jeez, shrapnel.
Yeah.
That's how my grandpa lost his leg, was shrapnel from a, he didn't stop running.
Well, and he had a little, what was it in your pocket?
Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't tell him that either. In my breast pocket, the reason I didn't get hurt much up here is that I had a folder of pictures, girlfriends, family, that kind of thing. It was about that thick. And then I had a camera, which was it was 110 millimeter, which is about yay was in there. And it went right through
Probably a
those.
German camera.
Now, when it went through those, by the time it got to me, it injured me, but not enough to be debilitating. The leg was much worse.
Didn't you bring that photo album the last time? Do you still have that? Do you still have the photo album? The little packet, or did I?
Oh, I have. I took, the dumb thing I did is I dismantled and took many of the pictures out of it.
Oh, sure.
But I have it. And you can see where the leather is torn up.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Well, okay.
Well, you don't have class.
I do.
You do.
Ellie!
They'll be fine. It's
What class? What class is it?
music theory.
If there's an issue, just let me know.
Okay.
I'll see you.
This doesn't happen very often.
No, this was great. I know you went through a lot very quickly. You hardly have to explain this is from an actual tank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
This is
there's
from
an
a tank barrel.
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Somebody could see how he could make some money.
Yeah.
That cost me 3 marks.
Yeah, but.
Well worth it.
Yeah, but look how many sections there were on that.
Yeah.
You still see the rifling and that? That's just really. Somebody was very clever.
Oh, yeah.
Very clever.
Well, it was in an area where there was a lot of German manufacturing area. That's where it came from.
You guys were.
Was that a German that figured that out?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Germans are good little
Yeah,
entrepreneurs.
they're
Trying to make a little money.
Yeah, you guys went right through the Ruhr area, so yeah.
Yeah.
And here, Magdeburg,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know.
That'd have been the right
See, when we got to Magdeburg, it was stop. Russians said no further.
That's it. The L was the cutoff point.
Where did we go through the line when we went with the?
Well, that was,
Johann, no, it wasn't.
we went
Johann.
through Magdeburg when on that trip, when the
Yeah.
wall was still up.
That was Johann showing us that.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that was when,
How'd you like to see that camera?
that was,
Never got that close.
Couldn't we?
no,
No. Gudrun.
yeah.
So aluminum then? It's not real heavy.
Yeah.
I think it's steel.
Well,
When I noticed that map, the battle map, there's still some mark, looked like a colored pencil or a grease marker on it, noting spots in that map you gave of the Normandy map.
Yeah. That map was operational,
Yeah.
they were using
I'm
it.
gonna take that.
It's right behind the beaches too, right behind Omaha, there were some spots circled. And then a few others. I guess I could have got this down as I was staring
This is
at
a
it.
good book.
Who were you
I
with?
saw it once before and I think I'm gonna have to get
Check
that.
it out at Carol. It's got knowledge.
Might be a good one to get for, right, good.
Yeah.
For what?
I'll just show parts and special topics next time.
Yeah, chuck that in there, that's garbage.
Next year.
Yeah, there.
Well, now you guys have to stock again next year, you know, now you're committed.
In the Capitol 2 weeks ago when I saw the Jeanette Rankin statue, and as I was looking at that, we got evacuated out of Capitol for a bomb threat. So I didn't
You
look
were
there.
there during that.